So we've covered a great deal of material and topics so far today. We started off with a variety of what-if scenarios, resulting in possible predictions for our future grid. We got a glimpse inside a leading manufacturer's crystal ball, and we learned a lot about storage. In our final session, we are going to really learn about what is happening now. What are people betting on in terms of investment? How is a city that is in the middle of a transformation actually making it happen? And how is a utility adapting to today's new reality? Introducing this panel is Governor Angelina Galiteva. She is a long-standing member of the ISO Board of Governors, a critical member over the last 7 years. She's chairman, founder of Renewables 100 Policy Institute. She serves as chairperson of the World Council for Renewable Energy. She's really passionate about our evolving grid, and she's dedicated to the advancement of renewable energy solutions. Please give a warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Governor Galiteva.
Thank you so much, Joanne. You're doing a terrific job, by the way. And thank you all for being here, which is the last and most exciting session of this day today. I'd like to thank the CAISO for doing yet another great conference and another wonderful symposium. It has been an incredibly progressive force for good and force for transitioning to 100% renewable energy. And we've been on the leading edge, not only in California, but nationwide and internationally as well. And this symposium is a labor of love. We like to come here every year, and we like to recognize the contributions that not only the CAISO has made, but each and every one of you as stakeholders or market participants. And I'd like to acknowledge once more today, along with, of course, CAISO management, my fellow board members, the hero of the year, who's Tom Dowdy. Tom Dowdy has worked tirelessly. And he is an example of dedication and success in overcoming everything in order to be able to work for the transition to 100% renewable energy. So we have been focused on the grid of the future, and it has been an exciting day in terms of listening on what are the solutions to move forward with decarbonizing and getting to 100% renewable energy in a decarbonized, digitized, decentralized, and democratized energy future, where we are going to be dealing with the energy imbalance market, with greater regional integration, with making sure that we can optimize optionalities, and that we can, in fact, plan for what we know we don't know, and for what we don't know that we don't know yet. And that is something that the ISO does every day, as Mark Rothletter pointed out earlier on. We need to be focused on risk mitigation and taking these opportunities to optimize optionalities and opportunities, because by collaborating with each other, not only in regional integration, but vertically as well, we can capture all the benefits of the market. We're seeing the breaking down of silos in terms of industry. We're electrifying the transportation industry. We're electrifying the building industry in terms of heating and cooling. We're going to be electrifying all of the other industries, such as shipping, aviation, and industry as a whole, which is going to be a challenge and an opportunity as well, especially in the context of what was referenced earlier today of the new Interpanel Commission on Climate Change that came out with a report that was sobering. And we can accept it as something that can depress us, or we can accept it as an opportunity where we can be even more successful in transitioning and making sure that we have the solutions in our hands and that we have the playbook for the future. We've been looking into the future today in terms of electric transportation and the role of electric transportation, in terms of storage and how storage is going to be an integral part of providing demand energy response solutions, of advancing community choice, of making sure that CCAs, utilities, and everybody plays by the rules and make sure that we are transitioning to a situation of everyone is a good grid citizen so we can integrate more and more renewables into the grid. The panel today, which was near and dear to my heart and which is why I wanted to introduce it, is not a panel that is only of great experts and people who are focused on making sure that we can transition to that better future. It's also a panel of leaders and movers and shakers who also happen to be women who are making a huge difference. And as we transition to that new energy future and to that new energy reality, one of the focuses that we've realized as the ISO, and where Steve Berberick and our team is very proud, is that we've focused on the role of women and how women help transition our agency and make it better. And we're very proud to announce that this last year, the incoming graduate class of engineers for the ISO was actually majority women. And that was an extremely successful milestone that we reached, for which we are extremely proud. So if you want to be successful, one of the big #1 items is hire more women. The experts that we have here today, though, are trailblazers in and of their own, and they have been an incredible force for good. We've got Nancy Pfund with DBL, or the double bottom line partners, which is an institution, a financial institution, because financing is absolutely important for making sure that renewables are successful, that works on the double bottom line, not only economic benefits, but also environmental and social change. And Nancy has been a visionary in her own, where she has focused on companies like Tesla very early on, City Solar, Next Tracker, and Advanced Microgrid Solutions. We also have the perspective of a utility with Jill Anderson, one of the largest in California, Southern California, Edison. She comes with a background from the East Coast as well, the New York Power Authority, one of the largest state-owned utilities, very focused on renewables and progressive programs. So Edison is very lucky to have you, Jill. We look forward to working with you. We also have another mover and a shaker, the mayor of Salt Lake City, who is Jackie Biskupski. And she has focused on transitioning a city, not in California, to a progressive 100% renewable energy target, and focused on environmental justice, equal opportunity, and of course making sure that there's justice in terms of housing and opportunities for underprivileged communities. So we're very, very lucky to have these women here who are going to be participating in a panel that's going to be led by none other but Dede Hapner, who was the Senior Vice President at PG&E. She was responsible for customer relations and strategy with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, as well as the ISO. Dede has had a very distinguished career, and even though she's now retired and likes to travel to Paris and enjoys Europe quite a bit, she still has time to be dedicated to promoting change and making sure that we've got our next leadership trained. She has now become the executive in residence at the Ross School of Business at the Sustainability Institute in the University of Michigan. And we're very excited to welcome Dede here and our wonderful experts to learn about how we can overcome the challenges now and what type of leadership we need in order to ensure that we are successful. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Angelina, for that warm welcome to all of us. And I think since Angelina did a pretty good job of introducing all of us, we should just get started. We have a lot to talk about today. We have a lot of different questions that we talked about in various pre-meetings, but we also want to take advantage of the discussions that were held in the various panels today. So I think I'm going to start with you, Nancy. Your credentials are well known, and you are clearly a leader in the investment community and are committed to change and strategy. So how have you made your decisions, and what kinds of things are you and your colleagues watching for? Are there specific signals that you look for in this really changing space?
Thank you, Dede. Great question, and of course, one of my favorite subjects to talk about. I just want to say, in speaking of talent, what an honor it is to be here, and a fantastic crowd, and many thanks to the ISO team for bringing us together and leading us this way. And I'm thrilled to be on this panel with such accomplished leaders. And don't worry, we're not going to prevent you from getting to your cocktail hour on time. So a lot of people ask us, how do we make decisions about what to invest in, especially in the sustainability part of our work? Because we are impact investors. We do invest for financial return, and we have to make the same kinds of returns or better than all of our colleagues on Sand Hill Road and such. But that second bottom line, we want to drive social, economic, and environmental improvement in the regions and sectors in which we invest. And so to do that, I mean, it's not the easiest job, but it's a fun one. We have a trifecta approach that we've developed. And the first leg of that trifecta is we follow the carbon, because obviously, carbon is a bad actor. It was great for 100 years. We didn't know what we were getting ourselves into. We developed a huge energy industry around carbon that catapulted the United States to leadership across the world. So, but now it's a different scene, and so we need to see where is there a lot of carbon, because that needs to change. Second leg, as impact investors, we want to fix something broken. Nothing against sort of some of the traditional venture deals that are, bringing you, automated dog walkers and things like that, because there's a role for that. And if there's a market and there's an unmet need, go for it, I say. But as impact investors, we want to do something that really fixes things that are broken, like the health effects of gas-powered transportation. I mean, just the obvious things that go with this territory. And the third leg is very important for the venture capital asset class, the really long bets that we're making. And that is, if we see the first two things and check those boxes, and we see it's an industry where the most iconic names in that sector are 100 years old or more, it's probably time to invest. Because the whole last century was optimized for carbon. I mean, we grew because of that. The whole next century is will be optimized for carbon reduction and avoidance. So there will be survivors and thrivers that are left from the 20th century. We're not out to replace everybody, obviously, but we need new solutions. And the one thing I really enjoyed all of the sessions today, Philip from Mercedes, I just want to tweak a little bit of what he said, because he kind of said that because Mercedes has been around for 125 years or whatever, it's got a lock on safety, it's got a lock on this. And I've owned Mercedes. I mean, I used to be a big customer until I shifted to Tesla, but. But it's super important. I mean, I feel that safety is not something that goes with age. It goes with doing your homework, designing cars and testing them, and getting the highest safety ratings kind of out there. And so I don't want to leave this place without honoring and recognizing that innovation can lead to very safe vehicles as well, even if the companies are only 10 or 15 years old. So with that trifecta, we, of course, started in solar energy and electric vehicles and storage a long time ago, where we have expanded, and we're still very active in those segments: transportation and mobility, the autonomous drive, the ride sharing, electrification. That trifecta is a very, very lucrative place in which to invest, and it takes many forms. But we have gone beyond, because if you really want to follow the carbon, you're going to recognize that agriculture is 30% of carbon generated on this planet, and 40% of people on this planet are employed in that. So there's huge opportunity in food and agriculture. There's also huge opportunity in conservation, and that's one that we're just starting to to understand. We know that deforestation is a huge contributor to carbon generation, and yet when you think of those iconic names in conservation, you think about the Sierra Club, the Wilderness Society. Are there any corporate names that you recognize in conservation? Have we figured out a way to monetize conservation so that we reduce carbon? No. So that's an area of extreme interest, and it goes far beyond sort of the super tech approaches to carbon sequestration. There are all kinds of market-based solutions that we see. So I could go on and on. There's resource optimization, there's the circular economy, but the good news is that today's entrepreneurs are all in for solving this problem and doing it in a way that results in the policy goals that we all share in this room.
Okay. And we will get back to it. I think it's going to be a fairly free-flowing conversation. Jill, having worked as an EVP and Chief Customer Office for New York Power Authority, and now at SCE, so different business models, what do you think the differences are, especially working in this particular space? Once you get past the legislature, California, New York, that they do share some common themes. What was your decision? What did you want to accomplish when you came to California?
So I love New York. I was in New York for 15 years, and New York Power Authority is a public entity kind of similar to SMUD out here and very mission-driven. So I'm personally someone very motivated by being aligned with the mission of the organizations that I work with. But what really attracted me to California was the scale that we're deploying things here in the clean energy area, and the scale that we're experimenting, because we are piloting and trying things out at a large amount of customers that get impacted at once, and there's such an opportunity for us to learn when we're doing that kind of experimentation. So it was about a year ago right now that I was first having conversations with SCE to come and move out here. And I clearly remember flying from New York to California, which was probably in my life like the 5th time I've ever been in California was a year ago. And I read the clean power and electrification pathway on the plane. They had just released it, so it was in Utility Dive, and I'd seen all the press, and so I read it. And by the time I got off the plane, my thought was, I have to work for this company. If the leadership who I'm about to interview with, if anything rings true in those meetings similar to the messages that is in SCE's clean energy vision, this is the place I want to work. And to me, it's a very simple strategy. It's about greening the grid, making the electricity that we consume as green as possible. And we've heard a lot about that today. The pathway that SCE has laid out is 80% carbon-free by 2030. And at the time, just a year ago, nobody was saying that. Like, no utilities were saying that. There have been utilities since then. And now with SB 100, lining right up with that, of being able to get carbon-free by 2045. Now it seems possible, but back even a year ago, it sounded so ambitious. And then the second part is to use electricity to decarbonize the other sectors. And we heard speakers talk about that already this morning, that we want to get electric vehicles. And so our goal is to see 7 million electric vehicles on California's roads by 2030. And to electrify the buildings. And we have a target of electrifying just 1/3 of the space in hot water heating by 2030. And a year ago, it sounded bold and big and it was exciting. And when I did meet with all the executives, they were all talking about it. And so I was like, okay, it's real. It's not just a marketing document, right? And it is real. Now that I'm in it, we're really making decisions, investment decisions, resourcing decisions, policy decisions based on achieving a clean energy future. So I'm really happy to be here.
Okay. Can I just say the thing I was going to do when I was going to get to introduce Jill was simply to say that New York's loss is California's gain.
Thank you, Nancy.
I've had the privilege of working with Jill on some projects. She has a can-do attitude, and she rolls up her sleeves and works right alongside everyone else.
Well,
so
thank you.
glad that you've shed your Empire State status.
And now that I've been here for almost a year, I can't imagine living anywhere other than California. It's so beautiful. So we had no idea, but it's wonderful.
Okay. So we're very excited to have you on our panel, Jackie. One of the things that Angelina did not mention in your bio, which when I read, I wasn't sure whether it brought a tear to my eye or just made me laugh, is the reason that you were named Jackie was after Jackie Kennedy.
Right. My parents were Catholic and very proud of President Kennedy, and I happened to come along in 1966, and the timing worked out very well. So, yeah, that's true.
So you came into a situation and immediately disrupted it
I did.
for
Good
some
reason.
very good reasons.
Very
so
good.
coming in as a woman, as very different politics, with very different politics and methods of doing things from your predecessor, what were the challenges you faced, and how did you decide what to do first, second, and third?
Well, my team and I, during the campaign, we had been listening to the community quite a bit, so we knew what the community wanted. And in order to obtain those desires, we had to have the right experts in the right places. And that required some shifting of people and bringing in leaders who really could see the mission and vision that we were pursuing. You know, creating big shifts in any society is not easy, and we're all working on a very big shift here. But the leaders that I brought into play really understood it, and it's been incredible. It's been an incredible ride for me. I've been in office 2.5 years, and we have, for the first time, master planned our transit system. We have an affordable housing master plan. We have a clean energy plan that will help us go clean by 2032 and reduce our carbon emissions 80% by 2040. So we'll be following your lead and hoping we catch up, because for our community, these are all priorities, and in order to achieve them, we are moving together. And those cultural shifts around affordable housing becoming a real priority for the residents of our city are manifesting in many ways. And part of the result of that is we are able to go green and affordable, and we have developers who have created models that we're sharing around the country now, helping others build affordable green housing with batteries, you know, with the lowest rent being at $250 a month. Like, it's unheard of, right? So very exciting stuff happening, but because the experts are in the room, you know, I lead a bold mission, but I also have very smart people by my side to carry out that mission. And probably half my cabinet is men and half are women, and we are leading in a very unique way. And that leadership has been embraced. I've had the good fortune of taking all of our master plans out to the community and saying, okay, we have planned around everything you wanted. Now will you help us pay for it? And what we did is a small, you know, tax increase of 0.05 cents on every $10 you spend. And that helps us implement all these plans. And they said, yes, tax us. Let's do this together. And so the shifts are happening, and you are seeing that money just coming into our coffers this fall. And we'll see where it goes, but implementation is now underway.
That's great. I'm going to start with you, Jill, on this round, and we'll just continue. And again, we all talked about this somewhat in the green room. One of the things that that struck me in the conversation that we had this morning with Mercedes-Benz, right? I called it BMW earlier in our conversation. I'm really not a car person. Is their technology and all that was extremely exciting, but I kept thinking about the difference for folks who are either low or moderate income, who are living outside of the norm. In some cases, they might live in shelters. They might not have homes. They're very concerned about food.
Right.
And yet they, I think, respond to issues about the environment because ultimately there's a value chain for them. How do you see that, again, starting with you, Jill, playing out in the role that utility, whether it was municipal or private, how does this play out in your world?
Well, I think that's an important role for the utility is one of service for everyone. And so we don't have the luxury of being able to just target the customers who align with our interests and who can afford the service we're providing. We have to provide a service that can be affordable for everyone. And it's really important in Southern California, Edison service area, because a third of our customers qualify for assistance on their energy bills because of their incomes. And so a third, so it's a significant portion of the customers that we're talking to. But I think that it's an opportunity for us also to think about how to make sure the programs that we're designing, that the clean energy and clean mobility that we're rolling out, that it is available for everyone. So, energy efficiency is a great example because we can target energy efficiency with the customers who struggle the most to pay their electric bills, and that benefits everyone because it helps those customers where energy is a big portion of their expenses during the month, and then the other customers that are currently subsidizing those customers who get assistance, everyone benefits. So we need to make sure that we're not just talking about and talking to customers who we know have that extra disposable income and are buying those new electric vehicles, right? Now, vehicles and mobility is another challenge. So, one area that, the role that we see the utility play is, of course, I said affordability, but also awareness and availability. So especially availability of charging infrastructure when we talk about electric cars. So in the pilot that Edison rolled out, I talked about how we are good at experimenting on a large scale. We'll have 1,250 charging ports installed by the end of this year, and almost 50% of those are going to be located in what the state designates as disadvantaged communities. So that includes areas where people are low income and also environmental factors like air quality. Now, we know that not everyone, especially low income, is not going to be buying a brand new electric vehicle. So we have programs that help reduce the cost of the electric car even when it's a second and third owner, so that we can help to encourage the used sales, for example. And also we're seeing that more and more of the shared mobility is going to be benefiting those customers because they might not be customers that are going to ever own a car, but they could be benefiting when we are electrifying the shared mobility at the same time.
Yeah, and we have similar programs as well, where we have partnered with the University of Utah to get affordable electric vehicles into the hands of people who maybe might not otherwise be able to afford them. And we also are, with our new sales tax increase, we'll be able to invest in green buses. We don't own our bus system, but we can partner with Utah Transit Authority to buy electric buses now and utilize those within our city, helping people, again, use mass transit and clean mass transit to get around. We're also a city that is an anti-scooter. We are working with...
Are there anti-scooter?
We are working with Bird and Lime to create what they believe will be model legislation and model city ordinances on how to bring them into your community in a successful way and be able to use those as a first mile, last mile clean air solution for transportation.
That's great.
All of those offer some real opportunities.
Absolutely. And I would say that, especially in California, a lot of people need cars, and it's sort of part of the California dream. Increasingly, we have public transportation, and there's no reason why we shouldn't electrify everything. But I do think that as we, the whole purpose of investing in electric vehicle companies is to drive down the cost so that they are accessible. And that was, it took a long time for the Model 3 to come out, and people were saying, oh, this is just a car for rich people. Well, that was never the plan. It's not easy to come out of the gate with a cheap electric car. And so 10 years in, you see the Model 3, and we'll go beyond that. So I do think that as companies scale and as industries mature, there's no need to say that you can't develop products for the lower end of the segment. By the same token, this is where policy really needs to lead. And we've seen every time in the solar industry, every time there was a multifamily discount or enhanced rebate in the California Solar Initiative for multifamily low-income housing, the Sunruns, the solar cities, they gobbled that up within months. I mean, it was just, and so it tells us that if there is a policy that looks at environmental justice, that looks at more inclusive ownership of the clean economy, the companies will jump to it, because all the people that work in those companies, that's their dream, is to have this have a whole new society that is driven by clean energy and transportation and business in general.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point on the policy can attract the investment. So in the summer, the California Public Utilities Commission passed a new green program specifically targeted at disadvantaged communities and low income, because we haven't seen a lot of success in community solar development, for example. So one question is people who don't own their homes, rent, or people who are in multifamily or who might just not be in a home that's conducive to solar can't get access to solar with today's program. So now we have a new opportunity to be able to encourage community solar development and connect renewable energy to people who for years have not had access. And it comes with a discount for those customers that are signing up and assistance from the utility to help collect all the customers to subscribe. And so I agree with Nancy. I think we should see full subscription of those programs as soon as we roll them out. And we should get customers signing up because you're getting a discount from your power, but it's 100% green. And I hope we have some of the top developers out there interested in building community solar in these communities now, because you're going to have a guaranteed revenue stream. So we can make it work with policies.
So how do you, in California, I realize this is not just in California, so I'd be curious to hear, Jackie, your perspective in that part of the world. When there is such a time lag between information that might have to go either through a board or the Public Utilities Commission or require enabling legislation, and that's a different pace than the pace I suspect you and your investors would like to work under. There's advantages with speed, and also you're committed to making these changes. And you, Jackie, as a mayor, you want things to move, and yet there's a constraining influence. So how do you all manage that?
Well, that's the
Hopefully better than I did when I was in that situation.
Oh, I don't believe that for a minute. But that's really the art, the fun part of what we do. And you're right. Being a venture capitalist in this sector is nothing like investing in social media or something like that. in order to get it right, you have, it's another trifecta actually. You need the innovation, you need the capital, and you need the policy. And that doesn't happen in a lot of other areas of venture investment. You just need the capital and the innovation. So this state is a great place to start the clean economy, because we do all three of those things really, really well, and we've led for decades. This is not a bunch of newbies deciding to jump on the clean economy bandwagon. You know, we kind of invented a lot of this stuff, and we have the strongest innovation hubs on the planet, and there's limitless capital. And so that's the background. Where we go astray a little bit, and that's the risk that we face as investors, and it's understandable when you know, for all of the SB 100s and 700s and these great laws that we pass, or the California Solar Initiative, I mean, everything that we've done is so world leading, but the devil's always in the details. And so, you know, you just get caught up in, you know, well, can you have multiple incentives for this battery, or can you claim the ITC and the S chip? I mean, it's just mind-numbingly complicated and for most people boring, but it's really important. And so what we need to understand is that in order to keep the capital sources happy in this sector, you've got to work fast for, you know, not ignoring all of the obligations we have to do it right and to be responsive to many stakeholders. But what you can't do is change the rules midstream. You can't have a lack of predictability. Because that will send investors running for the hills. And so what, you know, we've won some, we've lost some. I say we, the kind of clean tech investor community, but mostly we've won because we understand that there are other stakeholders at the table, and that we can make our case, and what's great is it's worth the extra time it takes, because these are trillion-dollar world markets. So, you know, we're not talking about some niche consumer market that will never grow big. These are worth it in the end. And in this state, which I just hope we'll never ever take for granted, we have that magic of stakeholders from very different walks of life and points of view coming together because we all care so much about making this right.
Okay.
Yeah. The environment here is unique. You know, in Salt Lake City, I'm a very blue community driven to do our part in this climate change world. We experience climate change on many fronts in our community. But at the state level, it's a very different story. And we're in some opposition there as far as direction on where we are heading. Yet the partnership that I formed with Rocky Mountain Power so that our community could have this unprecedented franchise agreement with them, that partnership is allowing our city and now 3 other communities in the state to go 100% renewable by 2032. And it requires some legislation to make sure we get there. And with Rocky Mountain Power leading those discussions on Capitol Hill and saying, we want this. And that makes a difference. And not only that, but we brought in some of our partners in southern Utah who are the holders of our solar farms that we're building, and the benefits to the communities where those farms are, and how we're replacing old tax dollars with new tax dollars. And that type of partnership is also very valuable in what we are doing. And then when you bring on subscriber solar, where people can't afford to put solar on their home, or they're renters, but they want to buy into the system, and this creates that opportunity. Like you were saying, those programs matter, so everyone has access.
I also think it helps to appreciate that oftentimes we're not arguing about should we do something, we're arguing about how are we going to do it. Yeah. And keep everybody, keep in mind that, we all want to decarbonize. And I think that's a little bit of a luxury in this state that we're not arguing about the should. And so let's try it and recognize too that we're not going to be perfect. It's something even the utility has to change and evolve as we think about how we design and deploy our projects, because we're held to a near perfect standard. You know, what we're doing is incredibly important, but we have to be okay with trying things and iterating and changing and growing as we learn.
Again, one of the things we were talking about today was regionalization. This is a topic near and dear to my heart. And one that actually, with the original ISO, we contemplated a larger organization, not just a state-specific one. And so we heard a lot of the speakers, several from outside of California, talk about the ability to maximize on that level, as opposed to just within a service territory or a single state or with WAC or et cetera. What's your experience been either now, New York is also a single state ISO. But in terms of investments, Nancy, or in terms of the experience you've had, Jackie, that helps you operate in both, because clearly you're investing in both because the technologies don't necessarily make a distinction. So how do you all approach that situation of a state interest versus a regional interest, or just the politics?
Well, from an investment point of view, we would call regionalization not investment ready. I mean, it's just there, you know, I've watched it. I mean, I have my own personal views about that it would be a good thing, but there are, you know, I've seen the various stakeholders in other Western states, the unions, the utility. I mean, the legislature. Yeah. I mean, it's very complicated, and so this is one where we just continue to watch it, and if we see, you know, there's some inflection points, some breaks, then we kind of have an idea of what we would do and who will be the winners and who will be the losers in that scenario. But I would say that it's really not ready. By contrast, you know, looking at, say, the CCAs, the increasing, 19 or 20 consumer choice aggregators in California, that's a much nearer term trend that we are watching, which does lead to, you know, certain investment decisions around choice and more a more active consumer voice. So, but even that one, we're not really ready to pull the trigger, because there's all kinds of controversies. The charge, the PCIA that's being debated about how much that should be, that will affect the growth of the market. So that's why I keep saying the policy has to be right if you want people like me to jump in and start funding the innovators.
Excellent. Yeah.
Well, for us, there's contradiction in what's happening. You know, Rocky Mountain Power is building an electric grid system right now from Yellowstone to Disneyland, and much of that will seep into our national parks along the way. But then we have the state, and as many of you know, our state is trying to drive coal from southern Utah into Oakland. And, you know, so there is conflict, yet still progress is being made. And that progress will happen quicker with the help of California, I believe, and the pushback coming from Oakland on becoming this coal port, and pushback from other parts of the country as well, saying, wrong direction, let's not tear up Bears Ears Monument for the last of the fossil fuels. let's move to that green economy that you can build. We're one of the sunniest states in the country. So we absolutely can move in a different direction. It's a matter of choices and the political will. And that has been a barrier.
Jackie, you said your constituents were open to a tax to fund some of your investments. Is that like local, just around Salt Lake City, or?
Yeah, so it was particular to Salt Lake City, and it's a sales tax, so it also captures funds from those who come in and use our roads. You know, we're the capital city, so a lot of people are coming and going regularly, but they end up paying into this to help pay for the infrastructure. So I think that was part of the buy-in for the residents there. But all the master planning by the experts, too. You know, they want their affordable housing, and they want it to be green, right? So that mattered to them.
But the rest of the state is still is not as aligned with the green mission?
No, we have 3 other communities that have followed our lead: Park City, Summit County, and Moab. And that is it, though. Like, we are the 4 communities that are really pushing for this new direction. And there are some in southern Utah that are also embracing it, but there's a big battle down there right now.
Yeah, I experienced some of that kind of dichotomy in New York because the urban areas are very aligned with the green objectives, but the more upstate parts of New York were not as supportive. So we spent a lot of time arguing about the should we do it instead of focusing on the how. And so that's one advantage when you are more isolated, because you're able to get constituents lined up in a similar direction. But we're thinking about how are we going to win this war on climate change, which is urgent. And climate's a global pollutant, carbon's a global pollutant. We need to figure out how we can do that at the least cost and influence as many of the stakeholders as possible.
One of the things that I've noticed when we talk about wind, and I've noticed a real shift talking to people from other countries about this, is huge support for wind, but when it comes to siting offshore wind, it gets tricky, to say the least. And there may be some specific technologies that are really exciting, but they might not be the right time or the right place. I love the expression that you used in terms of investment worthy or ready, rather. And so I'm wondering if you saw that in New York, as much as I think we see it in California, and from a technology perspective, are there answers to that?
Yeah.
It seems like there's a resource to be captured if we can solve this issue.
So when I joined the New York Power Authority, I was hired in as the director of renewable energy, but the job was advertised as the director of offshore wind. And part of the thing I negotiated going in was, can we be more general, just in case offshore wind doesn't take off? I didn't want to get stuck with this job title where everyone would be like, well, she ran a project that didn't go anywhere, because it turned out the project didn't go anywhere. New York took many attempts to do offshore wind, spent a lot of money, developers spent a lot of money. We got significant issues that weren't resolved. I love the investment ready. We really weren't. We hadn't figured out how we were going to handle the economic impact on the fishing community. There was a aesthetic issue, because where we were siting the turbines was before the kind of edge of the horizon, so you could see them, and that's where you typically have the highest value property, similar issues we saw off Cape Cod. But that was 10 years ago, and I think that offshore wind is ready in the U.S. Certainly it's been successful globally, but we have 6 turbines, 35 megawatts or something, 30 megawatts off the shore of Rhode Island that are full and visible, close. Deepwater Wind built those. They're operating. There have been prices now coming in for offshore wind on the East Coast, at least, that have been under $100, which I think I would have told you 10 years ago was impossible. There's floating turbines that people are talking about off Maine that go, much further off, so they are off the view of the horizon. So you don't see them. And we're seeing, some European investment in this area. Ørsted, I think, formerly Dong Energy, just bought blue water or deep water wind. So I think we're going to see offshore wind grow in the U.S., but it has to be at the right price point, too. And that has to be in an environment that is also considering the environmental benefits. So all of it kind of comes together in order for something like that to be successful.
Mm-hmm. Nancy?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's come a long way. I've seen the Block Island installation and the plans in that region. They're further offshore now, so it's often painful to be first in this field of siting, because that's when all the arrows are heading right for you from just about everyone on the planet, except your investors. So I think the learnings are as Jill described, and so I think it's being de-risked. I think it's going to turn more into sort of a project finance. I think it's not a technology risk. I mean, there are ways that you can kind of improve or reduce the energy loss and such, but it's an execution risk. It's a regulatory risk, a NIMBY risk kind of a situation there. One of the things that on this side of the country, we're seeing some interesting, we've been looking at wave energy for like 20 years and just kind of rolling our eyes and like, that's never really going to go anywhere. But now you're beginning to see some pilot investments and cables being laid. And so, never say never. I mean, I think, and there are certain advantages to that if it ever becomes economic, so.
And I think in your situation, it may not be waves or water, but there's technologies that might certainly impact why a lot of people come to your state.
Yes, that's true. We have a unique environment. I've been able to build the first 2 net zero fire stations in the country since I've been mayor.
That's great.
And part of that is because of our ability to pull from the ground what we need for energy. And our international airport right now, we haven't been able to do that same thing yet. Technology isn't quite there. It would be great if it was, because we're gold lead right now on that international airport project, but I would love to be net zero, and we're not quite there yet. So technology, anybody out there? We could use a little help. Yeah.
One of the things that has worked well in California and ideally would have spawned some things in other areas is the whole notion of credits and sharing the risk or taking the risk in exchange for one industry that's further advanced than another industry. Are those still the right vehicles? And if they are, what's keeping them from being employed in other parts of the country or at a national level?
You mean like cap and trade?
Right.
Or a tax.
Or a tax, yeah. Yeah, there's a couple different, and there's probably more than that, but those are the two.
Well, I mean, I think we all remember the carbon tax effort in Congress that was hard fought, but ended up losing. And so I think that was kind of a seminal moment that it became conventional wisdom that we'll never have a carbon tax. And while there have been all kinds of ideas floated to get that done, I don't see in Washington the kind of politics that would bring people together enough to get that done. Certainly it's important to price carbon, and so and I think we've seen place where cap and trade regimes are in place, you develop revenues that are able to then plow back into a clean energy economy and address issues like low-income neighborhoods and ports and things like that. So I think that while there was a lot of skepticism and huge resistance to the cap and trade program in its early days, I think there are so many beneficiaries now that we've been able to get through a lot of the implementation challenges that I do hope that other regions will look to it as not just a way to control carbon, but a way to, it's kind of an economic development tool, which is pretty cool.
Right.
But that takes the political will of a region.
Right.
And I mean, for all of the wonderful work that the mayor's doing in Salt Lake City, what you keep saying is that the rest of your state is not quite on board with all of that. And so you can't accomplish these advances without kind of the leadership to bring that together.
Yeah, the Northeast is a good example of that with RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, and you had the state of New Jersey when the governor changed, pulled out of RGGI, and now you have a new, they're coming back into RGGI, but it requires now that you have that many more people with different types of constituents, different pressures on their budget to get on the same page. So it's not simple to do regionally. It is being done successfully there in California. We benefit from using the cap and trade revenue. In fact, we've got a new program that we're putting together with University of California and Cal State University in our service area to take some of the revenue from cap and trade and use that to create a greenhouse gas reduction incentive. So we're thinking about how to modernize energy efficiency and design new energy efficiency programs that are targeted around greenhouse gas. One way to do that is to kind of siphon off some of the cap and trade funds and use that to drive direct greenhouse gas reduction programs. So there are a lot of opportunities when they're done well.
Speaking of that kind of sharing, one thing that struck me on a few of the panels I attended at the Global Climate Summit, including the panel of mayors and some of the international folks who were there participating, is while everyone was very uniquely situated, there was a lot of sharing of information and encouraging people, whether it was mutual aid agreements, if you will, or energy exchanges, or that sort of thing. Do you find that in your role, Jackie, you have access to some of those resources from other mayors inside the United States or outside of the United States to help you be successful when you are challenged in some aspects of what you're trying to do within your own state and region?
Well, I'll tell you, the work that I have the honor of doing on behalf of the U.S. Conference of Mayors is to work with the C40 cities team. And the work that we are doing is allowing for the success stories in this country to be shared all across the country with the mayors and to help them make advances in varying different situations based on how energy is provided in their community. And we gather all of that information through panels, but we also gather it through surveys that we do in this country, and we pull all that survey information into a system that allows for us to distill it down and share it. And you have very small communities of 10,000 people filling out that survey, as well as cities where there are millions of people. And the differing dynamics in how energy is set up or structured in those communities, by sharing that survey information, we are moving more quickly than we have been as a country. But we do need federal leadership to really advance this country and to truly live up to our part of the Paris Climate Agreement. So the work is great, and we are taking that challenge seriously along with Governor Brown and other governors. But we do need some federal partnership for sure, and these partnerships matter. They do.
I agree with that. I would say that since we're not going to have federal leadership in this particular arena for a while, I think we can't wait for that.
You can't.
And certainly the reaction to the UN report on the part of some of the Washington politicians was, well, of course we want to address climate change, but we can't do it at the expense of the economy and at the expense of job creation. Well, California has, 500,000 clean energy jobs, and it's the 5th largest economy in the world. And we got there because we supported innovation and we supported workforce development in tune with policy goals relating to global warming. And we don't give away the store to business, but we don't constrain business either. And the result is that we have quality jobs, not just for the people that work at Google or Twitter that know how to code. These are quality jobs for solar installers or charging infrastructure, construction folks. And I think that message really is important, especially in a state like Utah, where you have these concentrated cities where there's a more thriving economy, but you have a rural side of your economy that is just decimated in many ways. And to me, if we get this right, we are the answer. We're not the limitation. Right. We are the way that rural America, whether it's New York or Utah or parts of California, can adapt. And because the economists show that these distributed energy, these electrification of transportation jobs, et cetera, are more labor intensive. They create more jobs than a centralized monopolistic system that we all kind of grew up with. So I think there's a huge message of hope there that gets around waiting for Washington to kind of do something for us.
That's right.
So one last question, and I think it's intentionally provocative to give people something to talk about over drinks when we break. And that is, unless you're in a cave, you know that the midterm elections are coming up in less than a month. And as go those things, there may be further influences going into a presidential campaign. Right. So looking at that and looking the kinds of things that are all over the news, where are the opportunities for making the kinds of change that will impact the sectors that you all represent in ways that are really for the greater good and the benefit, whether you're an investor, a utility customer, a low income or person who needs more help with programs, those kinds of things. Anyone can start.
Should let you start because you're the elected official.
Well, I am hoping for some relief in a less than a month here. But you know, the opportunities are out there. They're in the partnerships like I have with Rocky Mountain Power. And what I will say is to communities in this country where you don't have that partnership, there are allies within every company, and you need to find those allies, and you need to build a project with that ally, like Subscriber Solar, to get the ball rolling in this direction. That creates jobs, that creates green jobs. We are fortunate in a way, even though there is this conflict, we are fortunate that in this country, this has left the federal level and come to the city and governor level. And in order for us to really do our part, we have to do practical things on the ground. And part of what I'm trying to do now is create a cultural shift within my community. We have a pilot project going on right now called Ditch Your Car. And in that, people had to apply to be involved in it. We had thousands of people apply, and we were picking 50 people, right? But they wanted to see if they could ditch their car for an entire month and use, the scooters, the transit, the green bike, and see if they could do it. And that's underway right now. We'll see what happens. But the excitement around just this one little idea, and if you can get people excited about doing their part in unique ways, I think that is a real opportunity that we have to grab onto.
I think the social movement that's going on right now, potentially we'll see in early November, but hopefully mobilizing new voters, people who have been on the sidelines, or maybe people who are just now coming of age to vote, is an opportunity for all the things we've been talking about in clean energy. Because if we're going to be successful getting, achieving these goals in just very short years, Nancy mentioned the UN report, and I think like the thesis of that report was something like we need far-reaching and unprecedented change in every aspect of society. So we need to mobilize everybody, and right now we've become a society that has very low level of activism. And so if what's going on right now is as polarizing as it is, if we are able to get more people to show up and care about issues and vote, I think that is going to be great momentum for what we're talking about here, because we need everybody to be changing their behaviors, changing their habits, recycling, like everything, if we're going to succeed here.
I would agree with everything that's been said. At the same time, I really feel that if you look at the polls, clean energy, electric cars, they poll well, whether you're blue, red, purple, I don't care what your political persuasion. And if you look at some of the biggest win states, they're the biggest red states out there. So I feel, actually, one of our CEOs, Susan Kennedy, some of you may know, who she used to be the chief of staff to Governor Schwarzenegger, and she was a CPUC commissioner, and she always says that he used to say, these energy issues should be post-partisan. This is really not something that is caught up in Dems versus Republicans. I mean, it is at a certain level, but we have enough proof points that the job creation ability, the economic development benefits from a clean economy are really not something that Democrats and Republicans disagree on. What will help is if we get a little bit more balance and less divided kind of views in the midterms, we'll be able to have civil dialogues and kind of learn from one another, as opposed to, just bringing, everyone bringing each other down for the latest scandal du jour type of thing. So, but I do firmly believe, and I've seen it in our investment practice, that when we go to Nebraska or Kansas, there are people that heart clean energy and the clean energy future just as much as we do.
Right. And I'll say to you that with things coming to the mayoral level on this issue, as soon as Trump announced that he was pulling the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Agreement, I was at the U.S. Conference of Mayors that day, and we immediately went to a vote. And we're all affiliated to a party, but we don't run as a party-affiliated government. And so the mayors, regardless of party affiliation, we all voted to stay in and made it very clear and announced it that day that we are still in. And that was a big moment in our country, I think.
And I think there's a parallel in the corporate sector, when Walmart and Amazon and Apple and Target, when all of these big companies and retailers that we all are customers of, when they say, well, we're going 100% renewable, I mean, that's pretty, combined with mayors and governors and regional leadership, that's a pretty unstoppable train, I would say.
Right.
All right, Dede? Thank
Yes.
you. I think that
I think that about does it.
that's about
All
it.
right. Thank you. Thank you.